Starting with Serena Poon, who's directly to my left. She is a nutritionist. She is a celebrity chef and Reiki master. With the launch of her health and wellness line, Just Add Water, and her lifestyle brand, Serena Loves, Serena uses her specialized method of working with clients, which she has coined Culinary Alchemy, which is very interesting. We can chat about that in a bit. Culinary Alchemy integrates energetic techniques with guidance and education on food nutrition, on how food affects our bodies on a physiological level, and as well as how it affects the emotional body. Her goal is to support the nutritional, emotional, and spiritual well-being of her clients.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sitting right next to her is Annie Vonheim. So Annie Vonheim worked with the founder of functional medicine, Dr. Bland. And so she has a background in functional medicine and disease research. She is the founder of Smart Pressed Juice, which harnesses the power of the green vegetable in a powder form. Sitting next to her is Stephanie Corden. Stephanie Corden, since starting her food blog, The Sensual Foodie, in 2011, this vegan chef and plant-based wellness expert is one of the top food critics in the nation and has appeared on shows like MasterChef and Gordon Ramsay's 24 Hours to Hell and Back. She's currently creating an online cooking course and cookbook for health-conscious people, transitioning specifically to a vegan lifestyle. And last but definitely not least is Kenshin Korea. She is the founder of Spice Baby. This is a platform that brings to life the science-based benefits of ancient spices for kids and their families, specifically in North America. She combines her doctorate in molecular biology from Harvard Medical School and her training from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition as a food as medicine practitioner and health coach. So welcome to our panelists. So let's just jump in. Cool. So Stephanie, I was talking to you a little bit earlier about transitioning to a lot of, the food trend now is more going towards plant-based diet. And this is something I'm very excited in because I do integrative medicine, and I see the importance that it plays, in our health. So as a vegan-based chef, how do you help your clients, or how do you sort of transition someone from the diets they're currently on to a more plant-based diet, and especially if they're kind of hesitant and understanding on how to become more vegan?
Yes. Well, I think it's individual. Depending on somebody's lifestyle and what they're used to eating. So, you have to think about what is going to be delicious. What is someone going to crave? What do they want? And I think that we all know what that is for ourselves, whatever we, what our thing is, what we like to eat. So, my first suggestion is generally to decide to choose more whole food,
right?
Whole fruits, whole vegetables, and incorporate that into your diet and try to create plant-based meals throughout the week for yourself, or figure out how to replace something so that it's not like a sudden 100% you're diving right into veganism, because I feel that that's like anything that, we try to diet and do like 100%, like do a juice cleanse or something.
Right.
It's sort of a shock to the system, and it's almost too much too soon.
So a slow transition.
So a slow transition is really key.
And do you tend to use different spices?
I love spices.
Yes. I could text spices all day too, because I was mentioning earlier, my dad used to own a spice company growing up, so I know a lot about the medicinal and the taste benefits.
Yeah, so, spices have been around for thousands of years, and yet I think in modern times they are feared. People are confused as to how to incorporate them more readily. So one of the big missions that I'm on is to demystify them for a global audience and really inspire their use in kitchens every day, not just for their flavor enhancing qualities, but really also for their deep, deep therapeutic and medicinal properties.
What would, I guess this is more of an open question, what would your top like 3 spices be in cooking from a medicinal perspective?
Great question, because I'm always like, don't ask me to pick my favorite spices. It's like asking me to pick my favorite child. I would have to say that the top 3. So they would be turmeric, number 1.
Yes. Yes.
Very cliched, but well-deserved. Cinnamon, and I can talk later on about how there's 2 kinds of cinnamon, and you want to actually use the right kind, especially if you're using it all the time.
Yes.
True cinnamon. Number 3, interesting. I would say probably coriander, because not only does it have digestion boosting powers, but people are using it for diabetes management and blood sugar control. It's also a really versatile spice and easy to use in kind of everyday mainstream dishes.
Right, I agree. I think turmeric has a lot of medicinal benefits, and there's just so much research on it all the time, showing that. And I guess this would lead me into talking about how Annie used to work with Thorne, which is one of my favorite supplement companies. So can you talk about sort of how you guys incorporate spices into your supplements? Because I know that the Mariva is a pretty popular, well, you used to previously do that, but can you talk about your experience with spices when you are cooking or just as supplements?
Sure. One thing that's really commonly known about turmeric is one of the active phytonutrients inside of turmeric is curcumin, which is, known to be, it's not the friendliest to our digestive system. We can't absorb it very well. So there's a lot of things you can actually do. You can, what Mariva actually is they actually fuse it with some phospholipids, which makes your cells absorb it easier. But
More so than combining it with pepper?
We don't combine it with pepper, or we didn't at the time, but in your very everyday foods, because I really, really encourage people to get their nutrients from their food and not from supplements as much.
Yes.
So in your foods, when you're cooking with spices like turmeric, just add some, coconut oil to it and some black pepper. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, if you add some just coconut, some healthy fats, that helps absorption along with some black pepper, that instantly can increase it up to 33% more absorption, so you can get more out of your spices. So there's a lot of little tricks like that. You don't necessarily have to genetically fuse
the way
it to things.
when you cook with that in mind of ensuring that you get the appropriate amount of nutrients. And how do you manage that? Because that seems like a lot of work. There's just little tricks like that. I'm positive all these really talented ladies know all the little tricks, but just something as popular as turmeric and curcumin, just think in your head, let's add a healthy fat to it, let's add a little spice, a little bit more, a little black pepper, and then you immediately enhance the absorption. So it's not too complicated. It's complicated for somebody such as myself who I don't cook as much. I'm very sciencey background, but I don't really spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So I think it becomes complicated sort of trying to understand how to bring food into science. I mean, I'm learning day by day. It's a learning process because this isn't something that's taught in medical school. Mm-hmm. So as a doctor, I'm trying to learn it. So actually, you guys are probably more experts in this topic than most medical doctors. I wanted to get into Serena's Culinary Alchemy because she was telling me about it earlier, and I love Reiki. So if you can tell us a little bit about what that is and how you incorporate. Yeah.
Culinary Alchemy, basically, it's sort of, it's a combination of education, which is everything that we're talking about, teaching people that you need to have those fats with the spices to really enhance the absorption, whether it's turmeric or even cacao. Mm-hmm. And of course, the nutritional value that goes behind everything, all the whole foods, but it's also that energetic, intuitive healing. And that sort of, that's part of Culinary Alchemy. So when I design programs and when I create recipes for people, mm-hmm. it includes that sort of, energetic reading that goes along with their bodies. So I believe that optimal health is not just our physical and physiological body, but also our energetic and emotional body. And there are certain foods that you can feed yourself that help ground you, that help with the different, I guess, meridians in your body.
But you would need to do it individually based. Like you can't
You
just
do.
throw something general out there and be like, this is the diet that, somebody who wants to, let's say lose 10 pounds or build some muscle mass, you would really need to individualize it and see them and sort of do a whole energy
Well, I mean,
evaluation too.
yes, to be really specific, but I think that with all diets, there's no perfect diet that's good for everybody. They're still all quite general that we need to kind of take as sort of a guideline and a skeleton, and we add in our own individual needs to it. So same with Culinary Alchemy as it would be with almost any other diet is you kind of have to, I teach clients sort of to tap into their intuition, and we do read what it is that's going on with them, and we customize accordingly. But if there's certain, there's certain situations that you're going through, whether you have, a crazy week of travel, and you need foods that are, like I said, say grounding or healing for different aspects of your body, there are general foods for that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and seasonal foods, like
Seasonal
I've heard the
foods.
term, if anyone wants to jump in, please feel free. I've heard the term eating seasonally. What do you guys think of that? I don't necessarily know if I agree with it, but maybe you can change my mind.
Well, I think what we're talking about is generally what's the basis of Ayurvedic philosophy and the philosophy of Chinese medicine, which foods have certain healing properties and herbs and all of the things that are edible are, if it has enough of a soul, if it's soulful food, it's alive. It has certain benefits. There's cooling foods, there's warming foods, there's all these different aspects to different foods and
Right.
herbs and spices that help us balance our body. And so individually we are, seeking what we crave, and I think that's what's called intuitive eating. So for instance, if I'm really hot and I crave cucumber, that's going to feel really good to me. It's going to balance me, it's going to cool me down. Or if I have too much heat in my body, would I go have Sichuan food? No. So, we have to instinctively listen to how we're feeling when we eat something. And that's the basis of a lot of the Eastern medicine traditions.
Right, and I think a lot of the Eastern medicine ways of approaching eating, it's also more mindful. When you start eating, you
Right.
kind of. So, like, what sort of rituals do you guys have in terms of starting to eat? Everyone is sort of different, and there's different ways. Like some people will bless the food, some people say a longer prayer, some people, sit in a particular position, breathe for a few minutes.
But that's all incredibly powerful,
Right.
Because when you talk about eating seasonally, I believe in eating seasonally because that is when those, plants and those vegetables and that's when they're optimal, that is when they're harvested at its best. It has the most nutrients, it's received the most love, and that is what's going into your body. So as Stephanie was saying, a lot of it is intuitive, like for your body physically, but it also has to do with if you believe in the sort of the energy systems as well. So, if you believe in chakra systems, like you can feed your chakras as well,
So by eating seasonally and sort of having a more, but I was getting at more of what sort of ritual do you follow with your food, and how do you feel that that changes your food and how you digest it differently? Because I kind of believe in that. I think it's real.
Oh yeah, I do. Do you guys?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
definitely.
will.
Totally do.
I will say something along those lines. So not only do I feel it's really important to have an intention before you eat, but also when you're cooking, like you said with the Culinary Alchemy, the intention that you're putting those foods together, the intention behind that, and just knowing that you're really doing this as an act of sort of honoring yourself, honoring your family, if you're feeding your kids, makes a huge difference because at the end of the day, like Einstein said, everything is energy.
Exactly.
And in terms of the ritual, I would say that something I think is really underdone and can really boost digestibility and overall health is chewing your food a lot. When you chew your food, you activate digestive enzymes in the gut, and very often people are literally inhaling their food, either on the go or in front of their computers. So not only am I setting an intention that this bowl is nourishing me, but I'm really taking time to chew it. I'll put my phone away, put my fork down, and take some time. I think that would serve us as a society really well.
Very much.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree
I've
with
spent
that.
way too many times driving in my car eating a burrito because I was so hungry and I was having low blood sugar and I've got to get somewhere and I've got to pick up the kids and I have all these busy things that I'm doing, and that's not thinking about the food, and I don't like to do that at all. It's not pleasurable. It's not something I
Right.
enjoy. Yes, I love burritos, but not in that situation. You know,
Right,
so
'cause you don't really get to
you're not
connect with the
thinking about
food,
it.
and
You're
you
just
don't get to compare
inhaling
it.
it, and I don't normally. I eat very slowly, and I love my food. I
Right.
love to eat, so that is the last thing I want to do. But I'm so hungry, and my blood sugar is so low.
Right.
You know, so in that sort of mindless moment of frenzied eating,
Right.
it's not nourishing me as much as if I took my time, and maybe I wouldn't finish it. You know, but I felt
Just
better.
being more mindful in
Yeah.
how you eat.
Right.
It's also a basic form of self-care, right?
It is a form of self-care.
Just taking that,
self-nourishment.
yeah, just kind of taking that moment for yourself in any way, whether it's to have a meal or to sit there with a cup of tea. It's sort of that basic nourishment that we need. So
Right. So, speaking about nourishment, what are your opinions on intermittent fasting? Because that's like the opposite. Because people think that they need to eat 3 meals a day, every single day, breakfast, lunch, dinner. But now there's newer studies out there that show that intermittent fasting might be sort of the way to go, and try to do it as often as possible. Do you guys have any experience with that? Specifically, when a client comes to you and, you know, has heard about it and wants to, you know, start doing it?
I definitely think intermittent fasting is something that you need to talk to your healthcare practitioner about. Not everyone is a good candidate for that. There's actually a lot of studies that it throws off female hormones, and it could actually do a little bit more damage than good. So this is something you really have to plan out with your nutritionist specifically and your doctor. If you have low blood sugar or diabetes, this is not something you want to do. So this is
But
something
specifically,
people
I
should
would
plan
say
on.
an integrative practitioner, because if you went and talked to a traditional Western doctor, it, you know, they may or may not be up to date on that specific information. This is just the truth.
Yeah, that's true. But there's some basic things that you
Yeah.
can look at and rule out, like if you're a diabetic or your family has a history of diabetes.
Right.
That's something you want to watch for. Just like what I said, if you're female, that's something you want to watch for too. So maybe you want a shorter window of fasting.
Yeah.
Some people do crazy 16-hour, 18 hours. And that might be a little crazy, but 10 hours I think or 12 is perfectly doable for most people.
yeah.
So let's say somebody comes in, no chronic medical problems, no medications, and they are considering intermittent fasting. How would you necessarily approach that patient, or give them guidance?
I think we would break down their diet throughout the day. I'm not such a huge fan, I know people might assassinate me for this, but I'm not a huge fan of the ketogenic diet. I think it's going to have some serious long-term consequences that you're not going to see. There's a lot of science that actually goes back, it's not as sexy, but it goes back 50, 70 years that shows that fat, not only, everyone knows about it, clogging up arteries, but it actually makes your pancreas produce a lot more insulin than you can previously think. I see, I've worked with a lot of patients that have said, I don't understand, I've never eaten sugar, I pretty much control my carbs, how do I have diabetes?
Yeah.
And you really have to look at fat intake because that messes with your pancreas as well.
And your liver.
And
you
your
have
liver.
fatty liver issues.
So just
Right.
think balanced meals 3 times a day. Maybe your last meal is at 6 p.m. and you don't eat again till 8:30 the next day. That's perfectly fine as long as it works for your body.
I would agree with that. I think it's very individualized, and I have a lot of clients that, because there's so many different trends.
There's always so many trends.
And everybody wants to know what's on the cover of the last magazine. And, I always remind people about Atkins, what happened with the doctor that was behind that. So, because with every new trend, I have clients coming at me wanting to switch things up. And I would agree with you about intermittent fasting is that it is very individualized, and you do need to work with a nutritionist and your doctor. Integrative doctors are the best because they really get it from all sides. But I I think starting slow is the key, because you can count that sleeping time. And if you're getting, a proper 7 or 8 hours of sleep, I don't, just to be honest, but like if you're getting around the amount of time you're supposed to get, having 12 hours of fasting is totally doable, and it doesn't feel invasive or restrictive. If you just stop eating at dinner at a reasonable hour and you don't eat again until the next morning after you've had a chance to wake up your body, maybe do a little bit of exercise or physical activity, you've already hit that 12 hours. And so if you want to add in another 1 or 2 hours after a couple weeks and add in a couple more days of that, it's very doable. And then that way you can gauge how your body responds, and whether or not that's something that works for you.
Right. Yeah.
I'd love to jump in on fasting, because I completely agree that it's very individualized and you must check whether you're a good candidate for it. But I will say that I embraced intermittent fasting about 4 years ago, and it really has changed my life.
I agree.
And I think people forget that it's meant to be intermittent, and that's why I think a lot of people are overdoing it.
Agreed.
If you're fasting every day, it's not intermittent. I will also say that I think fasting has been part of human evolution out of necessity. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors couldn't always hunt, they couldn't always gather, so there were periods of fasting. And it turns out that while that's a short-term stress on the body responds by becoming more resilient. And there's really interesting evidence, especially with longer fasts, that the body starts to activate this internal cellular cleanup in the form of autophagy, where damaged cells and damaged proteins are cleared away. And there's even evidence that you can get renewed stem cells. So I would say, just in terms of practical advice, I always tell my clients the 12-hour overnight fast should just be a way of life. You should give your body 12 hours of rest. So between 8 p.m., say you finish dinner at 8 p.m. and eat breakfast at 8 a.m., that's a 12-hour fast. I don't even call it a fast. I think that should just be a regimen, because there is a lot of evidence that Americans and in the West, we eat for too many hours in the day.
We eat for too many hours and we eat too much.
We eat too much and we eat for too many hours, and the body repairs itself. The gut repairs itself when you're not, it's kind of like trying to repair a highway while cars are running on it, right?
That's a good analogy.
In terms of actual tangible tips, I would say the biggest mistake that I see people making with fasting is that they do this kind of 16-8, say every day they're fasting for 16 hours. And what they end up doing is skipping breakfast and eating most of their meals in the later half of the day. And we know from circadian biology research that that's a bad idea. Your insulin and your pancreas are primed to break down food in the earlier part of the day. So skipping breakfast, skipping lunch, and eating a big dinner might set you up if you're predisposed to potential like blood sugar control issues, and there is evidence.
I find that for practicality purposes, for my specific life, I found that a little hard to do. So I sort of fast and have a lunch and a dinner.
Yeah, me too.
It's just hard because a lot of times you have to go out and have a life and meet friends out.
Yeah.
You have a dinner, and so if you're always skipping dinner, then kind of makes things a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that's why I think you have to come back to the intermittent part. I don't think we need to be skipping meals every day. But I would say that if people are going to do 16-8, they want to try to finish their meal. They don't want to be eating like at 9 p.m. That shouldn't be the bulk of your calories, because we know that's not good for you. So maybe you do that a couple times a week where you do a longer fast. But just remember that your body thrives when you're eating in sync with the sun and the circadian rhythm.
The circadian rhythm is actually very important, and people underestimate its power. So let's switch over and talk about phytonutrients, because that's something that I think everyone knows a little bit about here. Specifically, let's start with Annie. So can you tell me, because I know you made a superfood powder, what is a superfood? What is a phytonutrient? Because, we hear those names so often, but do we really know what they are?
Well, a way I like to illustrate it to people is I just ask people, out of all the medicine and all the medical discoveries we've made throughout time, what's the most powerful medicine we've ever developed?
The sun?
You think about it.
We haven't developed
man. What's the most powerful one?
What's the most powerful penicillin?
So maybe antibiotics, but then you turn around and you think, all right, out of nature, what's the most powerful medicine we have? I say it's really simple. The most powerful medicine on earth, beating out anything we've ever developed, is the humble green vegetable, specifically the phytonutrients, which are the nutrients that exist within plants. Phytonutrients are the compounds inside of plants that defend them from pests, from bad weather, from everything that wants to kill them, and it keeps them alive. And by process of us eating it, something's called xenohormesis. So that actually means that those strengths that protect the plant, keep it alive, actually protect us. And there's a lot of science coming up on this, but we don't understand it a lot. When I first started working in functional medicine, they had discovered 10,000. Now they're pushing 27,000 phytonutrients identified to date. And they're finding that it speaks to our cells on a cellular and a genetic level almost. It turns off our genes. If we have genes for cancer or heart disease or, diabetes or a plethora of chronic conditions, phytonutrients specifically can speak to the messengers inside our cells and turn off those diseases. It could reverse a lot. There's thousands of studies showing how plants can reverse chronic disease, and the specific components inside of plants are the phytonutrients. So that's sort of like a deep dive into what they are. I am so excited about them, if you can see, because there's nothing more powerful on earth. So superfoods, it's sort of more of a general concept. It's a plant that has multiple functions. I think it's more of a marketing term than anything. I think superfoods is a term that marketing companies like, but I don't necessarily know if consumers Google, I need a superfood.
Because
Yeah, I mean, we
everything's like a
see the name superfood everywhere. I think I see the name superfood everywhere. And sometimes I'm like, what is a superfood?
Marketers love it. So does Google AdWords.
Really?
I love that word.
Like, I know which foods are good, I know which foods are bad, but what's a superfood? But I guess phytonutrients would be the closest to that, and probably mushrooms, to what a superfood is.
Think of a food that has an abnormally high amount of phytonutrients. So if you take iceberg lettuce compared to a cruciferous vegetable.
What would be the best ways to incorporate phytonutrients on a day-to-day basis? Your powder being one of them, and also, what else?
Spices.
Spices have phytonutrients?
Yeah, so curcumin and turmeric is a well-known one, but like cinnamon has cinnamaldehyde, cloves have eugenol, cayenne has
spices come from plants.
capsaicin. They're from the plant kingdom,
Right,
and
so
they're
so-
packed with phytonutrients, and you don't have to use that much to get a phytonutrient kind of punch. So, yeah.
So phytonutrients, so what are some phytonutrients, or are they just, what are some specific phytonutrients that, you would want to get?
Yeah, so
large
the ones
amounts
I
of?
mentioned are spice specific, but we know
Right.
lots in the fruit and vegetable kingdom. The one that I love to think about is anthocyanins in the purple and blue family. So like blueberries or purple cabbage, we know that's really beneficial for brain health and heart
So they're
health.
everywhere.
They're
They are.
everywhere, but
They're
there's so
everywhere.
many others, yeah.
But
Each
the
are colors.
king of all phytonutrients, and it's so simple because I feel like marketing companies are always trying to get at the next new one. It's mangosteen and it's acai berries. But remember this, don't listen to the marketing companies, even though I have one. But don't listen. The most powerful phytonutrient on earth is chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll.
Yes,
There's some
it's
controversy.
green.
Yeah, tell me about chlorophyll.
Spirulina, all of that.
Green vegetables are the most powerful plant you could possibly get.
And you just take a teaspoon and throw it in your water and drink it?
You could do that, or eat a salad, or get
eat a
some
salad.
cruciferous veggies. Just
It all comes
every
down to that.
every single meal, whatever you can do, just get some green in there. If you can't, I'm kind of lazy and I'm busy and I travel a lot, so I know I can't get green all the time.
Is that why you
so
created the powder?
I did it for myself. Believe it or not, when juicing became popular about 20 years ago, I live in Orange County. I would drive all the way down to Santa Monica to buy a week's worth of juices and drive it all the way back. And it's just not convenient. And I fly internationally because that was my job, and I couldn't bring it with me.
So juicing is great, but what about the concept of removing all that fiber from the juice? Because I think it's better
Yes.
to use the full
Absolutely.
actual fruit or veggie versus just removing all the fiber.
Yeah, you hit it perfectly because most juice companies, they take out all the good stuff. So you really want a blend of the two. Like for instance, just for our product, our organic pressed greens, the most chlorophyll dense plants that you can get are grasses, but we don't digest grasses. You need 4 stomachs in a cow to digest grass. So I juice that. And get like 6 times more chlorophyll than I can get out of any vegetable. And then you include whole vegetables like
So
broccoli
you
and
take actual
cabbage.
grasses that we can't digest, turn it into a juice, so we can digest it,
And then you blend it with whole vegetables that are good for you, that have the wonderful beneficial fibers in there. So that's one way to do it, but I always encourage people to get it through food, and these ladies know a lot about that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with you on everything. You need kind of both. And we actually have Just Add Water is a product that's really similar. So we're going to have to talk.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Tell us about that product.
It's really similar. It has 8 of these super phytonutrient, dense greens, but it's also got it's got broccoli, and it's got beets, and it's got raspberry, and it's got all the anthocyanins
So it's a
too.
quick way for somebody who's super busy and doesn't cook
Yeah.
to add it, and then you just mix water.
Yeah, that's all you do. And it's got probiotics and prebiotics and
How do you keep
digestives
the
and enzymes in
probiotics
there.
stable?
Well, I mean, it's what the product that we use, that we blend it in, is already stabilized. It's not as good as if you were to have something that's raw and living, but when you're traveling, and that's what we developed it for, was for my clients, it's the best, quickest, easiest thing that you can have, because you don't always have a chance to go and get a fresh juice. You don't carry a blender around with you in your suitcase. Some do, but not everybody.
Some
Not
people
carry a
actually
shaker
do
bottle.
that. When I travel, I actually just like to take some supplements and just
Yeah.
kind of go, because I feel like when I travel out of the country, I get better food anyways.
Especially in
But
Europe.
everyone, I feel like people know about probiotics, but still there's confusion around it. But I kind of want to talk about prebiotics, because I feel like people
Yes.
just don't know anything about that.
They're so
that's
important.
that's something that's just as important as probiotics. So prebiotics you normally get from food, or so what are some good ways to incorporate that? And how do prebiotics sort of work for our bodies to sort of set us up for the probiotics? So maybe Stephanie wants to start.
Oh, okay. So I just started trying something in the morning, because it's said that that's what sets us up for the day, not just for our digestion, but for our mood.
Right.
And so, I'll have my tea with lemon, I have lemon water, I have this whole little ritual I do in the morning. And I also started using a blend that has prebiotic and probiotic in it, as well as different grasses and other things. I just stir it up in my drink and I down it because it doesn't taste very good. But I'm paying attention to how it makes me feel. I
Right.
just want to know how it makes me feel.
And how has it made you feel?
I actually notice that if I don't have it, I feel I get this fatigue in the midday. I start to feel a little, and if it takes time for me to eat like a proper meal, then I start to feel less energetic.
So the prebiotic is helping you sort of process your food better and
Yeah.
less fatigue and
Right.
like the less afternoon sort of like
Yeah.
crash.
Right, and I do drink a lot of tea, so I drink a lot of tea. So all kinds of different teas.
I love tea too.
And whole leaf tea, because whole leaf, like whole food, has more in it that we need,
Right.
rather than the bagged tea.
And certain teas have prebiotic properties.
I believe so. I'm just learning about
I think so,
prebiotics
yeah.
right now.
I do.
But I also, just for me, know my rituals, and if I'm off, I do notice a difference.
Right. So it's like getting
I'm-
into a
yeah.
routine where
Yeah.
for the morning you'll have your prebiotic to sort of wake up your body.
Yes.
And that can work with your probiotic to
Yes.
improve your digestion
Yeah.
and how you get it throughout the day. So
Yeah.
what are other ways that we can incorporate these prebiotics into our bodies? Are there any spices that have prebiotic
Good
properties?
question.
So yeah, I like to think of prebiotics as fodder or food for the good bacteria in our guts, the probiotics, and you really want both. And it turns out that the plant kingdom is just rich with prebiotic fibers. Basically, any fiber that we can't digest, that the gut bacteria then digest and produce all kinds of beneficial compounds and grow and thrive. So some of the most common ones to incorporate would be things like leeks, Jerusalem artichokes, even bananas, and actually unripe bananas have more prebiotic fiber than a ripe banana.
Apples too, right? Apples have lots of
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all fiber, but there's some plant-based products that are just higher in those prebiotic fibers. But I learned that apparently it turns out that the diversity of your gut microbiome, which is a good thing, you want a more diverse population, and it turns out in modern times we are moving away from a diverse gut microbiome to a more kind of limited one, is really proportional. So the diversity of your gut bugs is proportional to the variety of vegetables and fruits that you eat in a week or in a month. And average Western diet following individuals, like many of us, eat about 12 vegetables, and that's it. Like we have our go-tos, like tomato, cucumber, peppers, whatever, but you really need to expand beyond your comfort zone. That's why farmers market, eating seasonally, getting like a produce box which challenges you to incorporate new vegetables. Right. Our ancestors ate boatloads of fiber, and we're not anywhere near that.
So are there any specific spice that has a more prebiotic, or you just say eat an array of everything?
Eat an array, eat the rainbow, as cliched as that sounds, and you've heard it everywhere, but it's really true. The spice that has been looked at for gut health and particularly for the microbiome is actually from the pepper family, so cayenne pepper, which comes from the pepper family. There's studies linking it to a more robust microbiome. And then we know turmeric enhances the integrity of the gut lining. So there's definitely properties within spices that can help with gut health, but really eat the rainbow.
Eat the rainbow.
One prebiotic I did want to mention, because I'm really excited by plants, is flax seed. Flax seed's a fantastic prebiotic fiber. I mean, it's rich in omega-3s, but the thing that I find most exciting about flax is that it has lignans that are fantastic for balancing female hormones. Because as we get older, and I'm dealing with this myself, and I'm approaching perimenopause, and I'm definitely noticing a massive change in my metabolism. I mean, my hips and my backside have exploded. And it's just, and for me, I'm tearing out my hair. The other thing is, I've gotten off birth control recently as well.
Yeah, that really shifts.
And I cannot believe what it did to my figure. Yeah. But so I've been feverishly researching how can I clear out this excess estrogen, like what I damaged my body with.
You've been truly using food as medicine, like you've been. So how much flax have you been incorporating?
Well, fortunately, I do make one.
Okay.
It's called pineapple chia, and we actually use sprouted fibers. So instead of just, a lot of fibers like bulk, and it's kind of nasty and it's seeds, so we actually sprout it, so there's more nutrients in it. And we use flax and chia, but flax specifically has lignans that help your body flush out estrogens. It binds estrogen, because one thing about nasty estrogens is it actually converts in our gut to a nasty one. And then we need to flush that out every single day, or our bowels will reabsorb it, and that's how we get nasty things like breast cancer and ovarian cancer.
By self-prescribing flax, it's worked.
Yes, that's definitely, it's a process. I mean, if you do something, but I'm not the only one who's damaged my body like this. Millions of women have been on birth control. Millions of women are approaching menopause.
Right.
And this is something that's crucial. I think that most women overlook is getting prebiotics. And knowing that prebiotics actually help with hormone regulation.
Right. So. Serena, what about you? Are there any specific probiotics that you go to for gut health? Now I'm kind of expanding it to include probiotics, because that's also something I think we should touch up on just slightly.
Oh yeah. I mean, they go hand in hand.
How do you incorporate that into your day-to-day diet? Do you get it from pills, or do you eat yogurt or pickles?
I mean, if I have the luxury of having it at my fingertips, like if I'm at home, I definitely get it from fermented products. It's so easy. I mean,
what's your favorite?
I have kombucha. I mean, I have it multiple times a day. So I'll have some yogurt. I'm plant-based, so my yogurt is, coconut yogurt. Kombucha, there's so many options out there now. And I love sauerkraut and kimchi, so those are great, really simple, very accessible ways to get it if you're having it from Whole Foods. And then of course, if you're traveling, you can have it in just add water, and you can have it just from a packaged probiotic. That, again, I think having that combination of a probiotic and prebiotic in your supplement is the most helpful, since the prebiotics do feed our probiotics.
Do you think we should separate the prebiotics a little bit before we start taking the probiotics, to sort of let our gut settle with the prebiotic?
I'm not sure if that's necessary.
Yeah, I don't know if that is either. I think it's better taking it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's sort of like, I agree with our spicy baby down there, that it is like
Yeah, no,
food.
I think just making sure you're getting those prebiotics all the time so that you're always
So you're
flush
constantly
with
throughout the day getting prebiotics, and then probiotics are
your fermented foods, or if you must, then a pill. In fact, I think there's a company called Seed that has designed
Seed
the
is
probiotic
great.
with prebiotic in one capsule. Yeah.
There's quite a few companies now, I think, that offer it, so it is very accessible. And I agree with, with our hormones. I actually found myself taking in foods that had slightly less phytoestrogens. I kind of sort of
Such as? Which
as
food?
flaxseed, soy, those seeds and plants in that family. I actually kind of stayed away from.
you just
for a
felt
few
your body,
years.
you inherently felt it. And that's
Yeah.
something that I think that we were talking about earlier, just sort of like feeling the connection with the food. And so you just felt that, or if you were craving other types of food that maybe didn't have as much.
Well, and that was also from birth control as well, because I was, putting that in my body for so long. And so when I went off of birth control, I kind of stayed away from all that until, like you said, you sort of feel your body having that sort of need. And then I added in peas more, and some flax, some chia, but mostly, I get it through peas. So.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah.
Do you guys have much experience? My favorite topic recently in food has been mushrooms. Do you guys have much experience in that?
Mushrooms.
And just as a general, because I feel like a lot of people are hearing about that, mushroom coffees, mushroom powders. But what are mushrooms, and why have we overlooked them for so long, even though like Eastern civilizations have incorporated them so heavily? And what experience have you guys had with them? Good or bad or magical?
Magical.
I'm a huge fan of the four-sigmatic mushroom coffee. We know from scientific evidence that mushrooms are really, really beneficial. There's evidence that they have cancer-fighting effects. They're immune-boosting. So if my kids get a cold, I usually make like a chicken broth with mushrooms. I try to incorporate them more regularly. I think they're an under-incorporated group, and I think that's why the powders help, because they're just easier to have higher amounts. And I think what we're learning is that there's different kinds of mushrooms with different properties. There's some that are more energizing, there are some that are more relaxing and calming, and I think, like, again, four-sigmatic, I don't work for them, but they've done a great job educating
and they
people.
do like mushroom powders?
They do mushroom-infused drinks. So
They're
the
delicious.
morning coffee is mushroom with chaga, I believe, and then the evening is the hot chocolate with the reishi.
Hot
So
chocolate with the
really
reishi.
depends on which mushroom and which one you want to have at what point in the day. But I think they are maybe a superfood.
They are
are
a
maybe.
superfood.
Yes.
They're, what experience have you had as a vegan, sort of incorporating mushrooms into the diet?
Well, it's rather than mock meat. I think
they're fleshy tasting.
mushrooms are really wonderful for replacing meat and can have a meaty texture.
And they're
they
healthier.
can be seasoned. One of my favorite restaurants in LA is Veggie Paradise in San Gabriel. And it's Chinese, and they do the kidney basil, which is kidney. They score it like they do the kidney in the traditional dish, but it's a king trumpet mushroom. And it has the ability to absorb the flavors that they season the food with the basil, the herbs, and it just tastes so good, and it feels good. And you just...
It's filling, and
it's
that's,
filling,
I think when
and
people
it
try to
has a lot of
transition over
good
to a vegan
qualities.
diet, they always feel
Yeah.
hungry.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what a lot of people say, right? That's not an untrue
Or they
statement.
ask you where you get your protein.
And
right?
I think mushrooms are a great way to get protein in
Right.
and sort of fill you up.
Right.
And your prebiotics.
Yeah.
Prebiotics.
But one thing I would like to add is that mushrooms can be inflammatory for some
Yeah,
people.
tell me about that.
So, again, it's such a great, and I love them, and growing up Chinese, it's been in our food or in our culture forever. And I use it every day, Four Sigmatic or Om, there's these great brands. But for some people, if their inflammation markers are high, it's something that they would have to be mindful of putting into their diet because it can
So
affect
if
their
their
skin.
inflammation markers are high, you'd want to control their inflammation first?
Yeah, I'd want to sort of kind of up their diet with anti-inflammatory foods, which are a lot of the greens, of course, and alkalizing anti-inflammatory foods. So
And then at that point, they can eventually start incorporating mushrooms as
Sure.
sort of medicine, and because they're so medicinal.
Sure.
It would
Or
make me
I
sad
just-
that there's a part of the population that can't eat them.
or they can just have like just be mindful of how much, because with all of these foods and these plants, it's all about that micro amount, you know. And if you're having it a little bit every day, it's vitamins for your body, you know. It's enough. You don't, you know, I think we sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed and we think, oh, we need to make sure we have a massive scoop of this and a scoop of this and a scoop of this. And if you're having a little bit every day, that's sort of what you need to sort of maintain, you know, a healthy balance. So, you know, even if it's slightly inflammatory for you, you can just have a little bit. You're still getting the medicinal values. Over time, that adds up in your body and in your system. But just be mindful of not having too much of it.
Right, and that's with everything, right? Mm-hmm. Not have too much of everything, except chocolate. You can have a lot
Cacao.
of chocolate,
Vegan chocolate.
which is medicine also.
Yes.
Yes.
Cacao ceremony.
Cacao. I know, we just did one.
There's one next week.
They're amazing.
Oh, wait, tell me about these
Cacao is like a
ceremonies.
plant medicine, basically.
I mean, of what tradition specifically? Mayan?
Mayan.
South
Maya?
American. Yeah.
And
Guatemalan,
they hold them in
Mayan.
LA.
There's
They
a place
do.
in LA that I discovered that's the Choco Vivo boutique chocolate store in Culver City, and I am going to go to it's my first cacao ceremony.
I've
so
actually
they're
never
having
done
one.
a cacao ceremony.
Yeah.
They're amazing.
Tell me,
It's. I think everyone does them differently,
I
right?
think it's
Food
similar
and
to
ceremony.
the
'cause
matcha, to
food,
the
I feel like,
Japanese
has become
ceremony.
less of. We've become so
similar.
disconnected with food when back in the day when we didn't have so much, we were more connected with it. Like we were more ceremonious
Yeah.
with it. When we would sit and eat it, we would, pray to it and thank it. And now we're just like.
Yeah.
Well, like the Japanese tea ceremony. We all
Yeah.
are familiar. If you're not, you can look it up. So, Japanese tea ceremony it's about mindfulness and the act of preparing tea in a ritualistic way. It's very simple. It's not
Right.
complicated.
Right.
And in the sense that's the South American answer
that has
to
so much
it with
meaning,
the cacao.
right?
But the cacao energy is like almost this mystical, more sort of euphoric energy.
Yeah, it's
rather than matcha, which you have more of a subtle, you notice the tea, and you can get a tea high,
Yeah.
but it's not the same as cacao's energy, which is very yang, very strong energy, right?
Magic.
So I'm excited to try it, actually.
Maybe I'll come.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes left for questions from the audience. If there's anything, go ahead.
Actually, I have two questions. One is, you guys talked a little bit in the beginning about intermittent fasting, and I was curious if we're supposed to eat when we're hungry or not. And then the second question, I know you guys focused a lot on plant foods, but what about responsibly raised meat, using the whole animal, bone broths, and things like that?
I'm happy to take a stab at the fasting question. So one of the things that we know from studies is that fasting can help rebalance your hunger and satiety hormones. I completely agree with you. I think it's a great question. I think if we just ate when we were hungry and stopped when we were full, aka intuitive, mindful eating, we would probably be better off. And I think a lot of people have lost those innate regulatory signals. So how often do we overeat or eat when we're not hungry out of boredom or stress? And something that I experienced myself and the research backs is fasting, when done properly, can rebalance ghrelin and leptin, which are the two main hormones that control appetite and satiety. So I think when done correctly, honoring the circadian rhythm and all of that, it can really actually help you eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. And then maybe someone else wants to take the animal question.
Well, let me get back to the fasting one. I actually have some experience with that too, as we were talking. Starting off slow and building up is always the safest way to do it, rather than just jumping jumping into the deep end and not knowing exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think, people, when it's in the same vein, when clients will start fasting, they'll often find the hunger so overwhelming at first because we never really allow ourselves to get genuinely hungry. And so it's also a way...
We don't. And I kind of believe we should allow ourselves to sort of sit with the hunger and
Yeah.
really fight
Panic.
it too much. It's okay to be hungry once in a while.
I agree, yeah.
I know that sounds silly when it came up, but it's okay to not constantly be putting something in, because I know I was always constantly putting something in my mouth associated with like stress eating. So.
Totally.
I think it's also important to look at that process as something that you are doing that's good for your body. That's sort of a slow, gradual detox, so you don't associate it with something that's restrictive, that may be punishment. So when you're looking at, this fasting process and that you may be hungry, like when you kind of identify that as something that is actually healing and it just takes a couple more steps, something that's nourishing for your body, you might actually have a different physical response to it after a couple days.
Right. I like the way you worded that. And her second question was related to bone broth specifically.
Responsibly raised meats. I know you guys suggest a lot of like phytonutrients, plant-based things. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that question.
I think her question is something related to incorporating bone broth and how to incorporate responsibly raised meats and our opinions on that.
Go for it.
Right?
I'm not sure if I'm the right person
Yeah,
to
I was
answer
going to say
this
we have a lot of
question.
vegans on
However,
this.
however, I do have kids.
But what you could answer is what's an alternative
Yes.
sort of vegan bone broth?
Well, yeah,
Well,
I
I'm
could.
not sure if there is.
I will
yet.
say this, that I am an omnivore and I am very conscious about where the meat that I eat comes from, because it matters hugely, not just for the animals and the environment, but also for your health. So we know that beef should be grass-fed, pasture-raised, rather than corn-fed. We know that corn is not the natural diet of a cow, and most American beef is corn-fed. So I think taking the time to find meat that's been responsibly, humanely raised, eating the diet that the animal was meant to eat, is probably going to serve your health if you are an omnivore. And then, I think there can be, benefits to animal products. I really think like the diet you choose is a multifactorial decision, and there's no perfect diet. And for me, bone broth has been very helpful for my gut. It's also something I give my kids when we're all falling sick. We know that like chicken soup really has respiratory healing properties. So I think there's a way to incorporate responsibly raised animal products in a healthy diet.
Just remember, it's really individualized to you and how your body reacts the best, because being vegan or plant-based, it's sort of a philosophy and a way of life. Like for me, I'm an omnivore as well, but I'm primarily plant-based because I know how powerful plants are. Right. There's something that's actually really interesting, if any of you guys have done, it's called the habit nutrition. And that one, you actually take a blood test and a DNA test, and it sort of defines what's the best type of diet for you. So it's very specific to your DNA and your ancestral lineage, and and today how you process.
What is that through?
It's called the habit nutrition. They partnered with 23andMe. So I did that a million years ago, right when they first started, because I'm from the industry. And then with Habit, all they wanted was, I had to drink this disgusting shake that was full of sugar and fats, and then they timed me over 3 hours and how I break it down, and I was throwing up in the trash can and got to take my blood, And but then it spit out my individualized plan, and it said I should be primarily plant-based. However, I have anemia and like other stuff like that. So I do, periodically I could benefit from a little bit of meat. So it's all about balance.
Yeah.
And that's really what's key, is really knowing yourself, your own body, and how you feel after you have something like bone broth. For me, it doesn't, I don't do well with it. I don't know why it causes me inflammation, so I can't have it.
And
but I know people who do
track
great
the
on it.
inflammation by symptoms or lab work?
Lab work is a great way to track it. It's a very simple test.
I just want to say something about animal products, because I think there's a lot of trendy diets that are all about, like the keto diet will, for some people, means a lot of animal products, and I like to think of meat as a side dish and the main part of my meal as plants, and I don't think we need to be having animal products at every single meal. Not if for nothing else, the sake of the environment, but it's also just, as hunter-gatherers, we didn't always hunt the animal. Like sometimes we just had to eat a lot of green vegetables and like nuts and seeds and tubers. So I feel like everyone is individual, but for me, what's really worked is incorporating it on occasion and treating it really as a side dish, and celebrating the plants is the main.
Yes.
Do we have any more questions? Yes.
Earlier you discussed the importance of phytonutrients. I'm wondering if anyone has an opinion on sort of the best form to consume it, raw versus not, for instance.
Versus powdered versus cooked.
I mean, I think that, Whole Foods is always your number one go-to. You want to get it raw in its whole form as often as possible, and then if that's not available, then you go to the next step, whether it's juice or it's cooked, or if it's like a raw powdered form, like the way both our products are, it's raw and dehydrated, that's a great form too. So you have your first choice, but getting it all is always ideal, so in any form that you can get it.
And if you want to plant nerd out, because that's what I'm all about, there's actually really cool studies too. If you're specifically after a certain type of phytonutrient, like if you're after lycopene, which is so good for men's health and prostate health, then you actually want to cook that.
Yeah.
So that you want to concentrate down. Same thing with certain cruciferous veggies. It's actually best to expose it to steam it just really quickly and then chew it, and that's what activates the phytonutrients in. So you can really dive deep if you like to plant nerd. If you don't like to plant nerd, then exactly what Serena said, just raw in its whole form is absolutely your best option always.
And tomatoes have lots of lycopene, so,
Yeah.
so. Anybody else with how they get their phytonutrients, the quickest, best ways?
Yeah, I agree with everything I said. I think some phytonutrients need heat to be activated. Some do better, or some lose potency with heat. So it really depends on what you're going after. I like to use a combination of raw and cooked. I will say that for people who have a weak digestive fire or just a weak digestive system, raw can be hard to break down and process. So lightly steaming or lightly cooking can help assimilation. Same with juicing, where you still retain the fiber, like in a high-powered blender, like a Vitamix or something. But it's easier to assimilate if you feel like your digestive tract is kind of not at its optimal best.
Cool. Any more questions? Over there. Wait.
Yeah, great question. So actually, if you're going after digestive health, you need to worry less about the bioavailability of turmeric, because then what happens with turmeric and curcumin particularly, it goes into the gut and then it's quickly excreted by the liver. So if you wanted to heal your gut lining or just to optimize gut health, you have to worry less about the formulation and what you're combining it with. But if you want it for systemic inflammation, which is all around the body, or you want it to be absorbed into even the brain, across the blood-brain barrier, then you really want to do things like combine it with a fat source, use black pepper to augment the bioavailability. So I just had a conversation before this panel with a functional medicine doctor who says, depending on what the patient wants, if it's gut healing, he'll give turmeric alone. If it's systemic inflammation like joint pain or even cancer prevention, he'll give it formulated with pepper and fat. So kind of depends what the goal is.
Or you could take both, right?
You can take both.
Because there's like very minimal risks with higher doses.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. So
Yeah, I
why
mean,
not
I just
take
like to
both?
cook with it a lot, and I like, the traditional cooking methods using turmeric always bloom the spice in fat and often combine it with black pepper. So I like to say that, the ancient wisdom was onto something, which now the science is proving has a basis.
Yes. And the raw turmeric is...
The root, yeah, you can use the raw underground stem as well in teas and soups as
Great,
well.
guys,
Yeah,
we're gonna
I
wrap
think-
up.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
believe me, I could talk about turmeric and all of this
day.
stuff for like the rest of the year. So thanks to everyone for coming out and chatting about your expertise. You guys are so knowledgeable in such an important area of medicine. And thanks for coming out.
Thank you.